All right. Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you guys are. My name is Jason Shepard. I lead ecosystem efforts here at ZEDEDA. We'll have the guys come up here shortly, but if you happen to watch or catch us on LinkedIn, every one of these um, episodes where we've gotten into this thing of doing a promo video. So thought we'd try something new this time. I only had time to come up with a solo one, but I'm going to play the little ditty and then we'll bring the guys up and get into a deep conversation on industrial and IoT and edge and the like. So pulled this together last night about 11 o'clock. It's getting busier by the day now, and we can meet more face to face. Sure, it's nice to see folks in 3D. This means teams of data didn't get real far doing a fancy song for this webinar. So this one was left up to only me. We're gonna talk about making stuff and energy. You can ask questions and learn a bunch more free. Tune in today as Rockwell A joins me along with Schlumberger to chat about Industry 4.0. Talk challenges we see, a lot of technology that's hot and not, and how we think the data's gonna flow. We'll talk about making stuff and energy. You can ask questions and learn a bunch for free. We'll cover edge to cloud and in between, in spite of being on your screen. We think you'll enjoy hearing from this group. Hope to meet you very soon out there instead of zooming on our underwear. Admit it, you've done it at least once, but there's no judging. Here's to wearing pants more in 2022. All right, enough of that. Let's. They're like, what did I get myself into? Are you guys are on? All right, cool. Well, again, thanks everybody.
We don't acknowledge that we are on.
Right. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining. This is our I think seventh episode of Transform Digest. So today we're talking about industrial edge. With me is Chirayu Shah with Rockwell Automation, and Obi. As Obi knows, I never try to pronounce his last name, and he'll get into it. But maybe we'll do a quick introduction from you guys, and then we'll kind of dive right into it.
Sure. Thank you for having us. My name is Chirayu Shah. I am apparently from Rockwell A, per the song.
Rockwell A and Schlumberger.
I lead product management function and marketing for our edge to cloud portfolio as well as analytics, and super thrilled to be here, participating in this awesome panel and sharing some of my thoughts. So good to be here. Thank you.
Welcome. And Obi?
Yes, hi, I'm Obina Ilochon. Just call me Obi if you don't want to get tongue twisted. It's hard to follow up Jason's song there, so everything else is downhill from here.
No.
Yeah, so I
came to hear your expertise.
Yeah, so I work for Schlumberger. We're the largest energy service company, and mostly oil and gas, but alternative energy is actually something we are very much focused on. I'm the asset oilfield and IoT architect for Schlumberger. I really look after everything from production to midstream and also the IoT platform for the company. So pumped to be here.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, lots of stuff to talk about. So for those that are joining, I know we've got people filtering in. Definitely drop questions into the chat as we go. Or the Q&A tab. We try to mix them in as we go. You keep it a free-flowing conversation. We'll keep a little time at the end for Q&A, but we want to keep this interactive and informative, and also have a good time in the process as well. So Chirayu, let's start with you. We've been seeing talk about Industry 4.0 for quite a while. I mean, IoT became the big buzzword in 2015 timeframe. A lot of folks in the industrial world would say, I've been doing IoT forever. So what's new? Kind of in your mind, what have you seen as sort of the evolution for industrial IoT and over the past number of years?
Yeah, So from my perspective, there's two different streams that I usually focus on from customer pain points perspective and what I see from industry perspective. There is the whole sort of the data thread and how we can improve the data and context within that, and how we can deliver that at a more optimized fashion to whoever needs to make those decisions within industrial space, from operator to a supervisor to a plant manager to an executive who's managing the business. But also there is this notion of speed and agility, and that speaks to more of the platform. How efficient are we? How productive are we in deploying these solutions at scale? And that becomes a lot of times the roadblock for a lot of our customers in terms of how easy it is for them to deploy and scale the solutions out. So to me, the data with context, really, really important to get that into the right people in the right time, but also making sure that these platforms are scalable and are available so that these solutions can be deployed. Because a lot of our customers getting stuck actually in initial pilots, 1 or 2 sites rollouts, or even if they like the solutions, they prove the value, the deployment and the services associated with it becomes a significant pain point, and it becomes a 5-year journey as opposed to value now. So just like in our personal lives, we're looking to get technologies that can help us deliver value and deliver value at scale. So to me, those are a couple of trends that I'm seeing that are emerging from IoT and data that we really are focused on helping solve for our customers.
Yeah, so big thing of like, more data driven, but also as that happens, starting to get into the realities of how do you scale it.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Obi, what are your thoughts on kind of the evolution of industrial IoT, or insert name here for what we're seeing with the rise of sensors and data and all the above?
Yeah, so in fact, it's we're one of those companies that will claim that we've been on the edge, computing a long time ago. In fact, our company started pretty much about 100 years ago with the founders taking resistivity measurements to understand the subsurface structure. So that's edge computing right there, right? So really, what has changed with IoT, as Shira, you mentioned, is how do you go from doing one-offs and doing it at scale, and also making sure it's secure. Secure is a big part of our operation, because before, things were done in silos. Once you have that insulation on your rig or your well site, you were fine. But guess what? The internet has crept in. And once that comes in, it's like a frenemy. So it's good because it helps, but at the same time, it introduces all the risk that you see on the cloud that now comes to the edge. So how do you make sure you can scale, and how do you make sure you can scale securely? Security is a big part of the difference that we're seeing with IoT.
Yeah, it's finding that balance. 100%. The whole trend here is as innovation speed picks up, you have to innovate to stay competitive. This whole trend is about connect formerly disconnected systems to networks to get business gain, but then you introduce risk. So how do you mitigate the risk? All the above. And you were talking before, like I joke that people are often in like pie in the sky mode up front. It's like Raspberry Pi and some public cloud just to get going. I'm like hacking away at it. It's fun. I'm not thinking, scale. I'm thinking POC party of one. And then the real world starts to kick in. So, obviously you guys have been evaluating this and building this kind of stuff out for a while. So you're definitely at that maturity level. So that's good.
And then one thing we're seeing also, just to jump in, the thing we're seeing is that this initially everything was done on the edge. It wasn't called the edge, it was called the well site. And then this thing called the cloud came in and everything went to the cloud. And now we're saying, well, we might need to move some more stuff to the edge because, you want to have autonomy, the satellite is not always connected. So you want to be able to make sure that thing still continue working in a disconnected state. So this pendulum swing and how we navigate that is really an important part of the discussion.
Yeah, moving everything to the cloud sounds great for the easy button until you get the bill. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you realize you need the distribution. So we're seeing that kind of the pendulum swinging, as you say. Okay, so you guys are obviously deep into these types of solutions and been doing it for a while. So maybe Chirayu, like what are you kind of seeing from a Rockwell perspective as like the most valuable kind of initial use cases in the kind of the edge and IoT realm?
It's so from not just from Rockwell, but in general from customers that we serve as well. what we are seeing is there is this natural evolution that's going on. There was a need to get data, and data was served up into a lot of descriptive type analytics solutions, right? So you just wanted to visualize, have a rear view mirror on what happened, and really just have corrective actions that you could take afterwards from that. To really bringing that data more and more closer to the users that they needed, and then apply more of the analytics and advanced analytics tools, where you start to get into that descriptive, prescriptive space, and even cognitive space, right? So this idea that the data is needed to really solve these business problems, and also applications that are specific to the process and the machine that you are operating with. So no longer just building a platform, but really building platform with a purpose that drives specific business outcomes. As an example, you are operating in a mine and you're looking to optimize the asset that's the crusher behind that specific process. And within that context, how do we learn from historical data? How do we provide analytics? How do we provide edge computing so that we can then deliver better value for those operators and engineers who are trying to optimize the production, right? So this trend of analytics is shifting towards more and more predicting failures, predicting outcomes, and then driving those actions towards operators so that they can be alerted before failures happen, and along the way, enabling this technology so that we can solve these problems more efficiently. So to me, that's sort of the spectrum of evolution, and technology is sort of allowing us to solve those business problems more efficiently now.
That makes sense. So you kind of see it as an evolution from people just initially as kind of monitoring. Let me just get visibility and whatnot. And I mean, I've done solutions where I'm working with people like, I didn't even know that pump was down in the basement running 24/7. I'm like, well, you could have just went down there to look at it, but it does expose new types of visibilities. But then once that stuff gets flowing, then you start to see you kind of riff off of it, so to speak.
Right. Exactly. So just one more point to add on that is that what we are seeing is a lot of customers are now adopting these AI and machine learning based analytics solutions in that realm, and that they are looking to provide those closed loop execution points closer to the machine, closer to that process on the edge. And that's where we are seeing a lot more rollouts around transformation programs, analytics programs, data-centric programs, where we are delivering specific business value, business outcome. And so as you evolve the edge stack from both platform and data perspective, you're just going to see more and more use cases around enumerating these type of technologies at scale from customers' perspective.
Yeah. First step is though, just expose the data, but also in a safe way, and don't take down the whole process in the meantime, I guess. Probably important. So good. Obi, what are your thoughts kind of on that? Use cases you guys are seeing, broadly within process industry, et cetera.
Yeah, so it used to be, the first goal was to instrument the hell out of your well site, so get as much sensors there as possible. But then we discovered that there was just so much data, the human mind can't comprehend all the different data streams and make sense of it. So, so having analytics and having agents that make sense of data and make recommendations was actually key. So I want to hit on this idea of the closed loop. People think closed loop is a fast loop. It's not necessarily the case. Closed loop just means you're able to, to look at data, analyze it, make decisions, and effect a control, right? And that doesn't need to be fast. In the past, that was done very painfully. You would get data, put it in an email, send it to the expert. He would spend 2 or 3 days on it, and then by the time the action was taken, it could be days or weeks. Now imagine if you had agents that were looking at the data, and initially, the agents would probably recommend an action to be taken, and an expert would see whether it fits or not, and then press the button. Eventually, you want to get the human out of the loop, but this needs trust. You need to be able to run that iteration a couple of times before there's trust in the system, such that that human is no more needed to press the button. And if that human is no more needed, then you don't need that to run on the cloud. You can put that on the edge. So we are seeing a lot of how do we make sense of data in a quicker way, and that really takes the human out of the loop and have as much as possible done where the action is on the edge.
Yeah, makes sense. I liken it to, if you come home and, if you just come home and throw everything everywhere, your mail and your keys here and whatever, and over time, like about a week, your place just look like a mess and you don't even know where to start. But if you, each time you come in, you put your keys in the right spot, you sort through the mail, you do all that, then it's clean, so it's processing things in real time it leads to less stack up on the tail end, and that's when like 99% of data, the statistic is that 99% of data goes unanalyzed because there's just too much if you're not taking care of it in the moment. So
yes, and actually an added part of that is only 99%, but in addition to that, only 1% of that is ever acted upon.
Yeah, there you go.
So it's even less, right?
So that, you mentioned kind of the whole kind of the human aspect. Historically, this is kind of the OT world sort of blending into data and analytics, and kind of the IT world and cloud sort of coming down and kind of meeting in the middle. Historically, the process has been isolated from data systems, well segmented, for obvious reasons in terms of uptime and safety and things like that. But there's also a lot of talk now about, instead of physical separation of concerns, we're going to see virtual separation of concerns. Are you guys starting to see that, where like soft PLCs are merging onto the same architecture as like a data stack, your data ingestion, or is it still kind of early for that?
Yeah, so I'll take a first stab at it, and Obi, you can chime in here as well. From our perspective, Rockwell built a what we call integrated architecture that was geared around our programmable control logics, right? So if you think about PLCs and controllers, that's where we aggregated a lot of information from all these intelligent devices. We built logic in there that drove the automation process, and we built the ecosystem that helped us kind of enable a lot of different use cases based on industries. The natural evolution that you're seeing is now, instead of the controller being the data aggregator, which it is for the layer 1, layer 2 systems, you're also seeing this data hub or data fusion platforms that are emerging, where you're starting to kind of bring in information not only from the controller and some of the intelligent devices, but also from other processes, other applications, and other data sources. So for us, the transformation happens at the hub level now, where we can start to bring some of that context together and then be able to serve different needs based on the business outcomes that you're driving, either from enterprise perspective or supply chain perspective at a plant floor, or optimization or productivity targets you need to hit. So there are all these different use cases that require now multiple sets of data. No longer are the days where you're looking at just plant shift report and try and make reports and try and make optimization through that, right? You are looking at weather data, you are looking at all these other things. And so I think the natural evolution in architecture is just that you have more information that's now being aggregated and contextualized so you can make better decisions. So you're just going to see more and more in the industry of the sort of the data hub and fusion platforms that are going to emerge because of that.
That's where a lot of the activity I see happening. We see a conversation about kind of that convergence happening on the bottom end, but I think the real potential is obviously in the data. Obi, are you seeing any kind of that trend? I mean, there's a lot of people like, oh, workload consolidation, make it all run on one magic box, which I do think there's value, of course, but it's also can kind of get complex and raise some other things. Anything you're seeing in that kind of sense?
Yes, we are. It gets there's no single answer to it, but what we're seeing is that the original Purdue model, which had control at the bottom and you had isolation and you had data at the top, that's not going to happen anymore, right? That you're going to have it's going to be a hybrid, because you do need to put IoT, embed IoT at different levels, right? Some of the things we're seeing is, before it used to be, if you have a pump controller, it's meant to just control the pump. But then what if you could bring in pump curves or bring in some contextual data about the actual pump? You could make more intelligent decisions, but that now needs you to reach out to the cloud to grab that, right? So we're seeing a hybrid mix where IoT kind of blurs the line, in that Purdue model, and really makes for a case to have some of these elements running side by side instead of completely virtually isolated. That being the case, you still need to make sure that your control system is not, it has some boundaries, because there are risk of bad things happening, if you don't. but we are seeing some blurring of the lines between, you know, the different tiers that were really very hard bounded before.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. Yeah, the lines are blurring. It's almost like segmentation is getting smaller and smaller, and compartment functions getting compartmentalized. And there's no single answer, but we're going to see increasing mashup. And so, how you architect today for flexibility is really important. Is that kind of the way to summarize it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing I would add to it also from our perspective is as industry evolves and as these needs evolve, what we don't want to do is provide these stopgap measures of just doing just enough, to your point earlier, Jason. And we have customers who invested a lot in their control system, in their automation systems, in their plants and manufacturing facilities. And we want to be able to drive that context with the data. So we're not focused on a point solution where we'll put a couple of sensors and drive an OEE calculation for that machine. What we are trying to do is provide all of that context as part of the standard data models and edge solutions, where we can sort of take all this information and serve it up in a meaningful way that our customers can get a lot of value from, instead of spending a lot of high value resources in stitching together all this data and upstream where they are not familiar with the process that's being run in the plant. So this idea that, you know, OB or Shirai or Jason and as industry people are working together, what we are focusing on is driving these type of solutions so that we can provide more productivity and more out-of-box solutions, so they can go focus on the solutions and business problems that they want to solve, as opposed to platform and data layers that they have to, you know, sort of work through to actually get to a business problem. And that's where we add value, in my estimation. And that's where our domain expertise come in to play. So what we can do is really provide that context along with the data to make them more productive.
Yeah, I think in the end, it's necessarily unique hardware and software and domain expertise that win, and how you deliver it, you know, in terms of new types of services and whatnot. And clearly, you guys are domain experts in your industries. You know, Obi, anything to add, kind of on kind of that front in terms of, you know, the kind of closing out on the evolution side of things?
Yeah, what we're seeing in the evolution is, you know, the oil and gas engineer is very unforgiving. You know, he or she will forgive other humans before forgiving software for making mistakes. You know, so it's the idea of it's essential that whatever we put out there is robust. It's also one that can't take any time from them, from their existing workflow. If it does, it's going to be thrown out of the door or we use as a footstool. You know? So we are also seeing the need to augment what's happening there. So, for example, you know, we talk about control. You know, human beings are going to be walking around the well site or the rig site while control is in place. But what if we can have scenarios or compute that can advise the humans not to go into a particular area because there's an operation happening there? Or what if we can, you know, analyze through video intelligence, look at the protective gear they're wearing and inform them that actually they're not wearing the right gear for the right operation. So these other ancillary aspects are things that really help the operation to go along. It's not just the control, but also the things involved around the process, you know, and how do we get software to enable these actual operations and make it acceptable? Because if it's not, if there's no value added, you know, the engineer on the well site will throw it away.
Right. You know, I mentioned, you know, kind of the pie in the sky mode, or, you know, we see a lot of, you know, kind of hacking happening out there, and, you know, people justify it in the sense of, you know, it being you know, it's just an overlay, you know, it's augmenting, you know, it's not in the middle of the control, you know, it's not in the middle of the controls and all that. So it's fine. It's switch and ditch. If it goes out, no problem. It's not mission critical, but it helps augment. Are you guys seeing that? Or do you think that's kind of more as people sort of figure out the right balance, like this whole, like everything's disposable? Do you see a trend there? Or is it really just kind of a bit of a fad as people just get started? Does that make sense? Like, are basically hacked solutions that we see out there today that people get started with, are they here to stay as like disposable solutions for overlays, you know, around the process, or is that just kind of because we're early?
So I'll take that, right? So there's a place for hacking. Hacking really allows you to see what the future looks like. And so we do see a bit of that, and we shouldn't stifle creativity. We should allow people, as long as it's done safely, hack. What we see happening is that there has to be a sandbox for hacking. There has to be a period where it's okay, the POC is done, now let's take a step back, and how can we productionize this? How can we scale this up, make sure it's secure, make sure it's industrialized? So yes, we do see hacking, and I would call it creativity, right? We do see a lot of that, and with the advent of with IoT, it's easy to be creative. You have all the bits and pieces you can put together to make something happen. But how do you take that something and scale it up? That's where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was getting at. Like we see all the time. So from ZEDEDA, we're management, security, orchestration. How do you scale in the real world and all that? But a lot of people don't care about that up front. They care about an app. They care about an outcome, and then kind of what happens as you go. I don't know, Troy. I wanted to talk about the people part a bit, but any other thoughts on kind of that whole trend? How do we balance innovation and speed to results, but also security and scale and uptime and safety?
Yeah. No, it's a massive challenge, and I think Obi is spot on in terms of we definitely want to provide people tools so that they can be creative, that they can be innovative. I think from our perspective, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that that we are responsible in providing technologies that help scale operations, optimize automation, and drive productivity. We're an automation productivity company at the end of the day. And what we're trying to do is essentially enable curiosity that people have and help them solve some of those interesting problems that may not have been possible before, that now could be solved with the technology that's available. So for us, that gets us excited, that gets us up from the bed, and that gets us going in the morning. So from that perspective, yes, absolutely. We still have to do all the things that you, Jason, said, and Obi said in terms of productizing it and security and all those things. But, we are, at the end of the day, serving people's curiosity and driving productivity, and we want to continue to do that.
Yeah, so I'm hearing, it's enable people to be creative, to innovate, to move faster, but do it, as you said, Obi, in a sandbox to where it scales after that. You don't have to start over, because we do see that a lot of times where people are like, they start with a solution, they develop a cool solution, but then basically realize, it's really hard to deploy this in the real world. I got to start completely over. And so I know that you guys have been investing a lot in really evaluating the space, and how do you build a framework that then you can innovate on top of, and again, don't have to start over. Cool. So we've kind of hit on this just now, but like I'm big on the people part. I think there's of course the technology aspects and how do you architect, and we'll come back to that. But I think in many cases, digital transformation, what do you want to say is well, the hardest part is not technology, it's people, and the complexities, that will displace me, not my job. I don't have the skills, that scares me, whatever. So what are you guys seeing out there in terms of kind of, how that works? And everyone would talk OT, IT. I mean, you couldn't go to a conference like 3-4 years ago without the Venn diagram of OT and IT. And I see a lot more collaboration. I also still see silos out there, but yeah, what are your thoughts on the people part? Troy, you maybe start with you, but like,
Yeah, look, I think we are all evolving in our day-to-day life. How we use mobile phones 10 years ago to how we use our mobile phones now. We didn't think we would be in that case, right? 10 years ago, if you'd asked us if you would be, all doing all our banking through our mobile phone, doing all the work that we do from personal lives and professional lives perspective through this small device that you carry around. I think evolution is good. And if we can provide capabilities that make your life easier as a person, be it in a professional setting or personal setting, and drive more, I keep coming back to the productivity piece. So you can do more things, you can do better things that more value add for you, as opposed to busy work that you had to do in the past. And that's what we are focused on, is how do we come up with technology and solutions that can help take away the grind, so to speak, and really get you working on exciting things that you enjoy. So it's not replacing the human element in the process, it's really getting you to in a spot where you can do more and better and faster, right? So as technology companies, that is our mission, is drive productivity and drive people to do more with their time. I think, there's some amount of change that everybody goes through, and it's a good sort of learning opportunity for us to kind of evolve in that space. And if we make things simple and not as complicated, then I think adoption of change could become an easier thing too. But from what we see, and you rightly pointed this out, Jason, is change management is a very, very important aspect of digital transformation. And no amount of tools and simplicity and solutions can overcome that. So having a proper practice, having a focused effort around that really sets you up for success. I know we have done that within our organization, and I think that's something that everybody should take to heart and have a proper strategy and plan around it to be successful at the end.
Makes sense. Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of loaded, a little bit of loaded questions, like tops down or grassroots bottoms up. Who's responsible for making the transition? And in what degree, and kind of how does all that work? Is it empower the people, or is it you got to have it tops down directive, or balance in between? How do you see that playing out?
Well, that's a good question. For Schlumberger, well, we're a service-based company, so people, we train our people, we get them used to the technology, and then we move them out to deliver the service. So you can imagine, this person who's been trained for years, all of a sudden, there's software, and they feel threatened by the software. Right? And so one of the concerns is legitimate. Is, well, how do I trust this thing? That is going to be operating my pump or my motor, or my valve. And we have to make sure we bridge the trust gap, right? And one of the ways we do that is really transparency in the way the software operates. And also that movement from monitoring to advice to making recommendations for the user to take, to the supervisory mode where the software is taking decisions and control and the user is just looking at it, to a point where the user doesn't even care what's happening, right? And so that trust gap is one that we need to negotiate well to be able to meet. The other one is, Shira, you mentioned that is really this idea that software is going to take my job. And a typical example is the driller. We have scenarios where before the driller was responsible for going through the information. And what we're doing now is really, if we can give the driller a software co-pilot, it will help them, be able to operate at a higher level, even more mundane things to the software, and focus on value-added aspects. So by doing this, the software actually makes the driller a better driller, And so it's really this negotiation about how do we put forth the value of software to people. Now, for Schlumberger, it's mostly bottoms up. Schlumberger is a company that, the managers were all technical, the managers have been there, done that before. So, they know the value of the engineers and of the products that are being sold. And so what we do is it's really to make sure that the people who are actually using the applications and actually convinced, top-down approaches rarely work. They might work for a period of time, but eventually the troops are the ones who get the job done. If the troops are not convinced, it doesn't happen. So the software has to really get geared towards those people and convincing them of the value. And of course, you need some management buy-in, but the troops need to be convinced, and software has to be built for those troops in mind.
Yeah, so it's I'm hearing like empower people. I mean, we have the creativity side, like empower people to maybe there's the whole don't reward fast failure, or don't penalize fast failure, but at the same time, you got to be programmatic about it. But also a level of transparency versus, hey, this mothership's going to pass down all this stuff, and just trust me. We had done a solution way back when I was doing core IoT stuff, and for this winemaker, we come in and signs up to this thing, and we're going to put in sensors, and we're going to help you monitor when you should fertilize and do all this stuff. And he's like, I know how to do all that. I don't want to, I know this is newfangled technology. I don't want any of that. we do it anyway. We come back a year later, and you could not peel him away from this phone. Because I got so much more time now. I can now focus on doing new types of wines, and I could be meeting my customers more. But it's just that getting past that initial thing that I've seen time and time again, which kind of plays right into what you guys were saying. So. Cool. Anything else on the people part? Just kind of practical advice. How do we, actually, I do have a question here. I'll come to from Colin, but anything else that you kind of final thoughts on the people side? Cool. Yeah.
No, it's really transparent, because again, it's really about transparency. It's decades ago, AI came up and AI said, "Hey, trust me, I'm the black box. I will answer all your questions. I'm the magical wizard." And that didn't pan out because the trust wasn't there. So trust is really very important for us, because we're a very conservative business, and we want to make sure things are done. Because the idea is that if it was working before, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So if you bring in software to help, the first question is going to be, well, is it going to cost me downtime? Is it going to make me lose production? If the answer to that is yes, then we don't even want to see it. So it's really about, again, making sure that the trust bridge is established.
Right. So actually, a relevant question. So from Colin here in chat, kind of related to the OT, IT, and the trust factor and all that is, so is it important to be able to send subsets of data to different people or groups and prevent IT sysadmins from being able to see everything in the data center, all in the clear? Or how do you segment off the data? Is it or do you just kind of trust it all to be centralized? Like, who owns what? I mean, it's a complex equation, and not really any single answer. But I don't know, Shirayu, do you have any thoughts on that? Or
so look, at the end of the day, it's driven out of what is the use case or the outcome that you're trying to achieve, right? So first and foremost, we always ask what is the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And then based on that answer, then you identify the right sort of data sets that need to be made available. There is some amount of centralization of platform that's needed to serve up all this data, so we don't end up putting straws in the plant for all these sub applications, and they're all sourcing data and colluding the network. So there is some level of data platform strategy, like I talked about earlier. So driving what problems you're trying to solve drives the data need, and then having a platform that can serve up more efficiently is part of the equation. The other thing I would say is it's not just the data, but also it's the density of data, like how much, how fast. Those are other equations that OT people understand, but maybe IT doesn't have perspective, or the recipient of the data doesn't have that perspective. So to me, it's really, really important to understand. I might have microsecond resolution on data in controller, but I might only be surfacing, sub-second or even second or 10-second interval data, because that's all you need really to solve this problem. So how do you decrease the density? And then you talk about sort of the compression algorithms and other things that we've done in historians and other places where you don't need all of that data. You only need just the summarized data, so you can predict the trends and you can predict the business outcomes and so forth. The other thing we've done is we're also looking at opportunities to train the models from analytics perspective closer to the controller on the edge, so we can source that data in real time, but only surface the outcome to the consumer of the data, right? So there are ways where we can skin this cat based on the problems you're trying to solve, and there are multiple technologies that you can apply to solve these problems from that perspective. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
Follow-up on that?
I think just to jump on that, I mean, Shirayu hit nail on the head. There is that for Schlumberger, we're actually trying not to send data to people. We want to send data to agents and information to people.
Yeah.
So instead of sending gazillions of temperature readings, well, maybe I'm interested in whether my motor is going to fail, right? So that's what you want to send, because human beings just can only deal with just a limited amount of data. So strategy is really send data to agents, let the agents figure it out, and then send what is relevant to people if needed.
And you base it, I guess maybe going forward, it's base it more on kind of who needs to know to do their job, what's the most efficient, versus, and it kind of comes back to the transparency point. It's not really about compartmentalizing data because I don't want you to see it. It's like, what do people need to know? How do we send them information versus just a bunch of bits? Yeah, and again, also there's no single answer, but I think it all sort of kind of ties back to that. I wanted to talk, just a little bit about advanced class here in a minute. We do have a question from Harry with ARC. So, how do you move existing apps to new edge platforms without disrupting normal users? So this kind of comes into play with the that transition between what you're running today, and probably a wrong answer is like, I was just scrap all that stuff and develop on all this new stuff. Maybe I'll start with you, Obi. Like, as you look to kind of maybe help people consolidate workloads into new edge infrastructure, what do you see as sort of good practices around that transition path?
So you're definitely right. We have very creative engineers, and they develop stuff, and they expect, well, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now I'm going to replace everything out there and make it work. Nah, it's not going to happen, right? So what we do is being able to run some of those old existing legacy systems alongside modern ones, using things like virtualization, right, to make that happen, right? Because then you're able to see the old and the new together, and eventually the new displaces the old, right? So that's one way, one of the ways we've been able to do it. And another way is also sometimes the IoT part is put on the non-critical path, right? So the existing systems run a critical path, and the IoT is introduced as a kind of a parallel flow to that. And so you're able to kind of see these two things running, and eventually you can switch to the new one. So those are the two ways we have approached that problem in Schlumberger.
And that's also maybe kind of to the trust factor by doing it in parallel. Number one, you just can't from an investment standpoint scrap everything, but number two, it builds more trust when you kind of run them concurrently versus like, hey, just flip over and let's see what happens. Clearly, when in a production environment with uptime and safety, it's just very different in general. But Jirayu, thoughts on that kind of whole thing?
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, what you're going to see is there is a natural evolution that's going to happen in software development, where we have a lot of Windows-based applications that were thick applications deployed with a client-server architectures in manufacturing and industrial space in general. And what you're going to see is more and more ISVs and software developers will move those applications into more container-oriented architectures, and how we evolve that from a thick Windows application to a combination of containers that can be easily managed and deploy and integrated into your solution. So there is that natural evolution that will happen from ISVs and technology providers. What you're going to see from deployment perspective is companies like ZEDEDA will help you deploy sort of those legacy apps using virtualization and then containers as those evolve through your solution set. So I think that natural evolution will happen where you'll modernize your environment, and manufacturers will have those migration cycles where they'll adopt newer solutions on the edge in the cloud. And the value here is that eventually, as you containerize your code, as you get away from legacy protocols, it helps you modernize not only on the edge, but use the same footprints in cloud as well. So it really becomes more of a scalable architecture. So, from technology and evolution perspective, over the next 5 to 7 years, you're just going to see more and more, applications that are delivered container first, and then legacy stuff starts to move into those sort of architectures, and you start to maybe decouple applications into smaller microservice-oriented architectures, where you start to kind of bring in some of this in containers, and others lay on in a virtualized environment from legacy code perspective. But that's going to happen. It's evolution that we go through from tech stack perspective. And forgive me if I got too technical on the audience.
No, it's good. I mean, yeah.
But I think it's part of the evolution that's going to happen.
Yeah, and we see a lot of augmentation. I'll give you it's kind of a funny use case, but it's real, and we've done this. We had a scenario where it's an oil rig, and it was well instrumented, but using analog gauges. And poor person had to fly into the rig every week and take readings and then fly back to the base. And all we did was just put a camera, to take pictures of the analog gauge. I went from analog to digital and pushed it back to the base. That saved, the helicopter trip to the well site. So in this case, we didn't really change anything on the well site. We just augmented that with the ability to get readings by having, the AI, converts from the image to a digital signal and send that back to the base. So that's a perfect example. Augmentation, nothing changed, but value added.
Yeah, it's another, a way to kind of adapt physical systems, compared to just the software side. I mean, I've seen it, where there's somebody that drives a truck around and they go all over the oil fields and they open the door and they listen. Yep, sounds right, and they move on, and replacing that with audio analytics and stuff like that and various sensing. But yeah, so that's there's a lot of the promise too of IoT is kind of augmenting these systems. But I mean, this is a big reason why, from a ZEDEDA standpoint, why we started with the harder part, which is virtualization, because you need that transition path. But then there's also upside around segmentation. There's upside around even running container runtimes like a Kubernetes. They tend to like to run in VMs, so a huge part of it. Actually, something as we were chatting the other day, like. The old elephant in the room that would be good to talk about is approach to security. Security is often one of those things where it's like, just tell me it's going to be okay. Big topic, but how do you guys see when it comes to, we talked about the people part, we've talked about, and we'll come back, I think, to just general architecture and best practices, but security, how much of an inhibitor is it for you guys? What are some best practices to approach that, and both from a technical standpoint and also kind of the people part, just addressing fears? I'm trying to start with you.
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, we have built a lot of our solutions that we talked about level 2, level 3 systems, Purdue models, so forth. We build a lot of the traditional deployment architectures around DMZs and no access, no touch environments where you clearly define what goes beyond one environment versus the other. And we could do those physical things in the past because we could limit the applications and the usage. What we are seeing more and more is the evolution where you are going to need connectivity to cloud, connectivity to internet, and security becomes an important aspect of that discussion anytime. And yes, we do have early adopters and laggards and so forth in manufacturing and industrial space that focus on those and that are on a different journey there. But from what we can do as a technology provider is adopt certain standards, provide documentation, provide the security access control, provide the reference solutions and architectures that cater to specific needs. And we've been involved in proof of concepts. We've been involved in validating these solutions with our customers, with our partners, because we understand that this is an important part of their business. If we bring any of this production process down, if they get cyber attacked, that's a significant hit not only to the cost of the operations, but also the reputation of that company. And so we take very seriously how we build our products, how we implement design for security principles, how we build our cloud services that meet the certifications and standards. And then we build around these SLAs and other things that we provide to our customers to provide the assurance. And I know each industry looks at it a little bit differently between the spectrum from security perspective, but for us, we build for the worst case scenario and then support all the use cases from there. So it is important, and it is the core tenet in how we develop our products and solutions at Rockwell.
Right. Yeah, and definitely. And as you said, it's also about the relationship and kind of the trust of that, of the brand and things like that. And of course, you have to have the right technical approach, but it's building the relationship and the trust, which is a common word for today, trust. But Obi, any thoughts on that? The big elephant in the room of security?
Yes, it is the big elephant for us because security is one of those things that is hard to sell. You can sell a shiny app.
Cost center.
Yeah, exactly.
Security is only an experience if it's a bad one. Otherwise,
exactly. Exactly. So one of those things that it's generally unrewarded, because you have teams who are thinking about this and making sure it happens, but most people don't give you a pat on the back, say, hey, nice, well secured, but then when stuff hits the fan, then it's a problem, right? So, but as a company, we've recognized that we've always been security conscious, and it's about taking some of those things that have worked well for us in the cloud and bringing them to the edge. So, for example, make sure you authenticate. Make sure the person who is using the system is who they say they are. make sure the person using the system actually has the rights, to use certain parts of certain capabilities. Understand that security by isolation is dead. We can't depend on that again, because you can have a trusted personnel bringing a compromised device to there. So you have the installation, you have the trust of the personnel, but then you could have a device that they brought in, and voila, you're hacked, right? So that's really an important part for us. Another thing that came up recently, we're also thinking about is this idea of data. It's kind of tied to security in a way. It's with data residency. So we've had scenarios where clients or companies or countries don't want data to leave their control. And so by doing things on the edge, the data doesn't leave. Information can leave, but data resides on the edge. So we bundle that in Schlumberger under security also, because for us it's data security.
Yeah, it's an important point, right? Applying sort of the RBAC approach to data, not just applications, right? And then applying that sort of model, that's something that we are contemplating and we are bringing into our solutions as well. So as you layer in data as a service concepts in your architectures, you're going to have these RBAC provisions around it to make sure that you control who has access to what information. And how you deliver it. So absolutely spot on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you focus on trusted data, and the policies behind it, everything else follows.
Yeah,
kind of the ultimate thing, especially information. To your point, that's when it starts to become really valuable. But so I'm looking at the time. So we have a question from Vaughn. I'll come to at the end, because I want to get back to kind of as we sum up really quickly. Just another thing. I mean, we're figuring out Industry 4.0, and now it's Industry 5.0 is the new buzz, with kind of this augmentation of kind of robotics and cobots alongside humans. And then there's digital twin and AI and 5G and insert buzzword here. Real quick thoughts on just how do you recommend end users, organizations kind of navigate all that stuff while also going to solve problems today? Like what's the kind of best way to just work through the sea of new technologies that are emerging? Obi, you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'll take that. So the oil industry, again, is very conservative. Most managers now don't care about buzzwords. They know they come and go.
Yeah.
As Shirayu mentioned, it's really about what is the problem you're trying to solve. Then the buzzwords are a means to that end. So we don't lead with buzzwords anymore, because that gets shut down. We lead with what's the problem and how can we solve that? We can solve that. For example, is like we have a need to do unmanned inspections or reduce the number of personnel required to inspect a facility. Well, if we could reduce the number of people that have to inspect the facility and the accuracy of the inspections, then why not use a robot for that? And so by understanding what the problem is, you're able to introduce solutions that would solve that problem instead of the technology being the end itself. It's just a means to the end. So things like digital twins, robotics, they are things that we're investing very heavily in Schlumberger, but they are really meant to solve specific problems for the company.
Versus solutions looking for problems, which we do see a lot of those out there. So Trari, you've got thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I completely agree with Obi on that front. The other thing I would add is, a lot of people are focusing on industry solutions, applications, and what I would recommend is think about your data strategy and how you're going to drive your data to right set of people, information, all the things we talked about today, because data will enable you to solve problems that you don't even know about today. So if you turn the conversation upside down from what I started with, which is around finding the problems and trying to solve the problems, the other way to think about it is, as you're doing that process, think about your architecture, think about how you're making and sourcing this data available, because then you will put yourself into solving other problems where you're not locking yourself into an application or a solution, right? So great thing to do is start with problem, drive the just enough platform to deliver value, but also build the platform in such a way or leverage the platform in such a way that helps you solve problems that you're going to encounter in future. Just like how we build control system to last 30, 40, 50 years, we should build our data platforms to drive multiple problem states, not one problem state. So I think that would be the one thing that I would provide as learning from my previous experiences, is making sure that you are building a scalable solution that goes beyond the current set of problems that you're solving. But absolutely start with a problem in mind, because you don't want to work on platforms that go nowhere.
But also, so start with a problem in mind, of course, but then also don't architect yourself in a corner. And I guess what I'm hearing too is part of the thing is we don't know where some of these technologies are going to go long term. So if you invest in the right foundation, and we're borrowing from a lot of stuff we've learned in the cloud of like platform independence, break things down into functions that you can interchange, kind of around a common core. Some stuff might be open source because it's not, it's undifferentiated heavy lifting. Other stuff, of course, that's your bread and butter. That's where you make your money. It is really about, I guess you're saying, architect the flexibility into it, because you just don't have all the answers. And then as you do that, start with problems, meaningful problems. Fair to say?
You must.
Yeah. Any other, kind of, we're right here. I don't want to, well, let me ask this while we have, and then we'll kind of wrap. So Vaughn asked, as a hardware provider, how can I partner with you guys? Interested, Rockwell and Schlumberger, any way to just kind of reach out online?
Yeah.
What's the?
You want to go first, and then I can.
Yeah.
Yes, sure. I mean, we different avenues. So it depends. So Schlumberger is think of it as dozens of companies within one, right? So it depends on the kind of problem space. A solution for the production group is going to be different from the one for drilling and for seismic, right? So it depends on the problem space that you're looking for. But in general, yeah, we have we're all on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me. We different pathways on our webpage to reach out to. But definitely, we're always looking for creative and valuable solutions.
Yeah. Look,
I was gonna say, here's Obi's personal cell number. No, but yeah, cool. Sorry, Charlie.
No, that's good. So look, Rockwell has had a proud history of partnering, and we absolutely focus go-to-market motion, both from our own development as well as enabling our partners to deliver value to our customers. We know that we can't reach every single customer who wants to drive industrial productivity, but we can do that through our partners and ecosystem. So if you are a partner who wants to participate, we have venues, we have programs that are available for you to participate. I'll give you an example. Our Edge Gateway software today is a service that we can deploy on any hardware. It's not limited to Rockwell hardware. So if you are an edge hardware provider who's working with ZEDEDA, or is working with OB, or working with any of us from applications perspective, we are able to deploy our applications and happy to work with you to make sure that your hardware is compatible with things that we're working on. So yeah, participate. We have ecosystem, and love to have more people take our technologies to solve interesting problems.
No, cool. Well, I think that, we're coming up on the top of the hour. We did tell you that you're going to sing us out, right? You're going to do a tune.
Sorry, my guitar is missing, so I can't.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And I'm having problems with the internet right now.
My audio is going out. No, seriously. So, but that's kind of a good place to wrap up. So this whole notion of, we're talking about this importance of trust. We're talking about the importance of kind of think about problems, but also architect in a way that you have the flexibility. Don't forget about legacy. Make sure that you've got a transition path there. But also, as you guys are saying too, it comes down to an ecosystem. I've said for a while, anyone that tells you they can do everything, I would run. No one can do everything really, really well. So the whole adage, it takes a village, is important, and so that's why you've been good to be working with you guys, kind of seeing the trajectory of just embracing the balance of ecosystem. And of course, everyone wants to kind of differentiate and build that value, but how do you pull it all together is, I think, key too. Yeah. So last thing, just do a quick plug. We're at time. Any final thoughts as Leah brings up the last slide? All good. That was, we covered a lot of ground.
It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you. I know we can't match your singing skills, but
Yeah.
thrilled to be part of the session today.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah. Obi, thank
Definitely,
you.
it's been a pleasure with talking with you guys, and yeah, it's always interesting to just have different diverse opinions, right? It's been a pleasure, definitely.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you guys joining. I was going to do a quick plug. So next week, May 12th, we have a developer day kind of centered around our open source efforts and Project Eve, which is Eve OS, which is the operating system that we leverage for our cloud offers. So encourage you to go to ZEDEDA.com. You can get to the link and you get online. So that's kind of more of the community effort. And if you want to learn about open source and what various different people are doing in the broader space, definitely join in for that. But again, thank you guys. Always a pleasure, and we'll catch y'all next time.
Thank you.